Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're jumping right into something that literally drives every single purchasing decision you make, every single hour of the day. We are breaking down the core metric of human satisfaction. I mean, how do we actually measure happiness, desire, or the value we get from the stuff we consume? Well, economists have a surprisingly specific framework for this, and by the end of this explainer, you're going to look at your everyday choices in a completely new, mathematically driven way. Let's get right into it.
All right, let's start with the absolute baseline. In economics, this whole concept of satisfaction boils down to just one word: utility. The classic textbook definition is simply the want-satisfying power of a commodity. It sounds deceptively simple, right? Basically, if you want something and a product can fulfill that want, boom, that product possesses utility. It's the invisible driving force behind literally all of our consumption.
To put this into perspective, let's look at a few super relatable examples right from the text. Think about just a standard loaf of bread. If you're starving, that bread absolutely hits the spot. It has utility. If you've got a burning desire to learn something new, a book fills that knowledge gap, right? It has utility. Or maybe you just want to veg out after a really long day. Turning on the TV satisfies your want for entertainment. In every single one of these interactions, we, the consumers, are actively extracting utility from a good or service.
But, as you might guess, utility isn't just some flat, simple concept, which brings us to Section 1, the 6 characteristics, or what I like to call the quirks of the metric. Let's quickly see how this psychological measurement actually behaves out in the wild.
So, looking at the first set of these traits, utility is, deep down, entirely subjective and psychological. It's basically all in your head. It changes wildly from person to person because it depends completely on your own internal estimate of the satisfaction you think you're going to get. And because of that, it's also relative and abstract. You can't touch or hold utility. It varies not just by the person, but by time and place. Think about it. A thick winter coat has immense utility during a blizzard, but absolutely zero utility if you're sitting on a tropical beach. It all depends on the intensity of your desire in that exact moment.
And that actually brings us to a massive headache for economists, which is our next characteristic. Utility is inherently not measurable. Since it's literally a feeling, you can't exactly weigh it on a scale or measure it with a ruler. There's no physical unit for human satisfaction. But a famous economist named Marshall proposed a really clever workaround for this. He suggested that, okay, while we can't measure the feeling itself, we can measure the money someone is prepared to pay for it. So if you're willing to pay way more for a cup of coffee than a cup of tea, money acts as an indirect measurement of your higher utility for that coffee.
Which brilliantly illustrates our final set of characteristics, the really stark difference between usefulness and morality. Here's the thing, utility is mathematically blind. It holds absolutely zero moral, ethical, or legal connotations. Something can have utility even if it's really bad for you. For instance, liquor might have harmful health effects, but as long as it satisfies a drinker's want, it holds economic utility. The source text even uses the extreme example of an armed robber or a dacoit. A gun in their hands is highly illegal and obviously immoral, but economically speaking, it possesses high utility for them because it satisfies a specific want. Utility doesn't judge you, it just measures demand.
Okay, now that we've got a handle on the psychological quirks, let's pivot to the data side. Section 2, the core math, and what we're calling the mango experiment. We're shifting gears from abstract theory into a cold, hard numbers breakdown. Now, before we metaphorically eat any mangoes, we need to define the two main mathematical variables we'll be tracking. First up is total utility, or TU. This is the big one, the entire cumulative amount of satisfaction you get from consuming a given quantity of something. Second, and honestly arguably more important, is marginal utility, or MU. This is the additional utility you get from consuming just one more unit. Think of marginal utility as the step-by-step added value, while total utility is your overall running score.
Let's lay out the full textbook utility schedule for our mango experiment. We're tracking someone eating mangoes one by one from 0 all the way to 6. I really want you to watch how the numbers scale here. When you eat that first mango, your total utility jumps from 0 to 10 utils, which is just our hypothetical unit of satisfaction. And because it's the first one, your marginal utility is also 10. You eat the second mango, and your total utility goes up to 17. But notice, your marginal utility, the added value of that second mango, is only 7. It's just the difference between 17 and 10. By the time you hit the third mango, your total utility is up to 21, but the marginal utility is dropped all the way to just 4.
Visualizing this upward but slowing curve really paints a picture. Your total satisfaction is absolutely climbing. I mean, you're definitely happier having eaten 3 mangoes than just one, 10, then 17, then 21. But the gap between each step, the added value, that marginal utility from each new mango, is shrinking fast. The first one tasted amazing. The second was great. The third, well, it was just good.
This shrinking added value, it's not just a fluke in our data, it's an absolute foundational rule of economics, known as the law of diminishing marginal utility. It states that as the amount you consume of a commodity increases, the utility you derive from the additional units just keeps decreasing. Basically, the more you have of something in a single sitting, the less you care about getting one more of it.
Which brings us to a super critical moment in our data set, the 5th mango. At the 5th mango, our marginal utility hits exactly 0.
We call this the saturation point. If you think back to the numbers, eating 4 mangoes gave us a total utility of 22 utils. Eating the 5th mango, the total utility stays locked right at 22 utils. That means at this exact saturation point, forcing yourself to eat another mango adds literally nothing to your total satisfaction. You are completely maxed out. The want has been 100% fulfilled. But, what happens if you just ignore the saturation point? What if you force down a 6th mango? Well, the data shows a sudden drop, a glitch in our satisfaction matrix. -3. By forcing down that 6th mango, you've actually damaged your overall satisfaction. Your total utility drops from its peak of 22 down to 19. And because the total utility went down, the formula forces our marginal utility to become a negative value, -3. In economics, when marginal utility turns negative, we call it disutility. You aren't gaining satisfaction anymore. You're actively experiencing discomfort. You ate way too much, and now you feel sick.
So, how do we tie all of this math and psychology together into a framework you can actually use? Section 3, the absolute visual rule. Let's lock in this relationship between total satisfaction and incremental value.
Based on everything we just looked at, there are 3 unbreakable mathematical rules governing human satisfaction. Rule 1. As long as total utility increases at a diminishing rate, marginal utility is falling. That's you enjoying those first few mangoes, but enjoying each new one just a little bit less. Rule 2. When total utility peaks, marginal utility is exactly 0. That's your saturation point. You literally cannot get any happier. And Rule 3, when total utility drops, marginal utility becomes negative. That's the realm of disutility, where overconsumption actually hurts your satisfaction.
And that pretty much wraps up our breakdown of the satisfaction metric. But before we go, I want to leave you with a thought to apply this to your own world. Think about your absolute favorite food, your favorite video game, or even a song you listen to on repeat. When was the last time you pushed right past the saturation point and hit disutility in your own life? Keep that mathematical curve in mind the next time you go for that one extra slice of pizza. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.